Ambassador Krix ZH Tal's third set of appendages quivered with what he assured himself was righteous indignation and definitely not fear as he addressed the Galactic Council. His crystalline exoskeleton caught the light from the chamber's illumination panels, sending rainbow refractions across the assembled delegates' faces, or whatever passed for faces among the varied species present. Esteemed members of the council, he began, his translation matrix struggling to convey the proper level of horror in his harmonics. I must once again bring to your attention the increasingly concerning behavior of our human colleagues. He managed to pronounce human as if it were a particularly disturbing communicable disease. Commander Elena Doom Rodriguez, Earth's military attaché to the council, didn't even try to hide her eye roll. She took a long, deliberate sip from her steaming mug of coffee, maintaining direct eye contact with the ambassador. The action caused several nearby photosynthians to edge their floating pods away, their leaves curling in distress at the sight of someone willingly consuming what their species classified as industrial solvent. Just yesterday, ZHT Tal continued, his crystal lattice structure now vibrating at what humans would recognize as peak Karen frequency. I witnessed no fewer than 12 humans engaging in what they call morning calisthenics in the embassy's shared recreation area. They were sweating. He paused for dramatic effect, allowing the collective gasp of horror to ripple through the chamber. Rodriguez muttered under her breath, "Oh no, basic biological functions." How terrible. She glanced at her datapad, which showed the current betting pool among human staff on what would be this week's complaint about their species. Exercise was currently paying out at 3-1 odds. Furthermore, the ambassador's voice rose an octave. They have begun importing increasing quantities of what they refer to as ghost peppers. Need I remind the council that these vegetables register as chemical weapons on standard toxicity scanners. In the gallery, Lieutenant James Reaper O'Malley carefully concealed a ghost pepper-infused protein bar behind his hand and took a large bite, causing the gaseous intelligence delegate floating next to him to temporarily lose molecular cohesion in shock. And let us not forget, GHTL was building to his crescendo now, crystal segments practically dancing with agitation. Their persistent attempts to introduce what they call game night to interspecies cultural exchanges. Do you know what they suggested last week? Something called Twister, a physical contest that involves deliberately entangling limbs with other participants. The very suggestion sent 3 arachnoid delegates into molting season 3 cycles early. Rodriguez crossed her legs and settled deeper into her chair, adding a note to her datapad, "Remind Rec Committee Jenga Night, definitely still on for Thursday." The council chair being a massive collection of semi-sentient plasma contained within an environmental field, pulsed in what might have been concern. Ambassadors HT Tal, while your concerns are noted, the humans have been, technically, within their rights according to the cultural expression clauses of the Galactic Charter. But they're so physical about everything. ZHTL's translator actually squeaked. Yesterday I observed one of them opening a nutrition packet with their teeth, like some sort of primitive predator. The packet was vacuum sealed, Rodriguez offered helpfully, and the pull tab broke off. Lieutenant Chen has already submitted the appropriate forms for improper packaging in triplicate, as per Regulation 247B, subsection Gamma. That's another thing GHTL whirled to face her, his crystals chiming in agitation. They actually read and follow the regulations. All of them. It's unnatural. No species is that thorough unless they're planning something. Rodriguez smiled beatifically, taking another sip of her coffee. Ambassador, I assure you, we humans are simply trying our best to be model galactic citizens. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe it's time for my afternoon high-intensity interval training session. I wouldn't want to be late, punctuality being another of our disturbing habits, I'm sure. As she stood to leave, she paused. Oh, an ambassador? That coffee you're so concerned about? This is decaf. You should see what happens when we drink the real stuff. The sound of crystal cracking slightly under stress followed her out of the chamber, along with the distinct impression that several species were urgently updating their threat assessment protocols. Just another normal day in galactic politics. The emergency alert blared through the Galactic Council chambers exactly 4 hours, 17 minutes, and 32 seconds after Ambassador ZH Tal's presentation on human barbarism. The timing was so perfect that several delegates immediately accused the humans of staging it, until they realized that would mean giving humans credit for being even more cunningly competent than previously feared. Attention council members, the AI's soothing voice somehow managed to make impending disaster sound like a spa appointment. The civilian transport vessel Stellar Serenity has been boarded by pirates from the Crimson Claw Consortium. They are demanding immediate diplomatic negotiations. Commander Rodriguez, who had just returned from her workout, still gloriously sweaty, causing a crystalline delegate to faint, checked her datapad and fought to suppress a grin. The Stellar Serenity's passenger manifest included 15 humans returning from a team-building exercise, which was technically true if you counted special operations training as team building. This is obviously a situation requiring delicate diplomatic handling, Ambassador G.H. Tal announced, his crystals vibrating at self-important frequency. We must form a committee to discuss the formation of a task force to establish parameters for negotiation protocols. Oh, for fuck's sake, Rodriguez muttered, then louder, or we could just deal with it. The council chamber fell silent. Even the ambient light seemed to dim in horror. Deal. With it, Z.H. Tatal's translator struggled with the concept. But they're pirates. With weapons and demands. Rodriguez stood, stretching in a way that made her joints pop alarmingly. Several delegates winced. You know what? You're absolutely right, Ambassador. We should handle this the proper way. She tapped her comm unit. Lieutenant O'Malley, please connect me to the Stellar Serenity. Let's negotiate. The main screen flickered to life, showing a scarred Vraxian pirate captain. Behind him, 15 humans sat cross-legged on the floor, looking for all the world like bored schoolchildren at an assembly. One was actually doing stretches. Greetings, Council, the pirate growled. We demand. Yeah, hi, Rodriguez interrupted, causing several diplomats to clutch their protocol manuals in terror. Listen, I'm legally required to offer you a chance to surrender. Standard Regulation 394C, subsection Delta. You know how it is. The pirate blinked all four eyes. Surrender? We have hostages. We have weapons. Is that a yes or a no? Because I have a protein shake waiting, and it gets weird if it sits too long. In the background, one of the hostage humans raised his hand. Commander, if they say no, does that mean we're officially released from the best behavior protocol? Rodriguez's smile would have made a shark file a copyright infringement lawsuit. Why, yes, Lieutenant Chen, it would. The humans on screen perked up like kids being told Christmas was coming early. One cracked her knuckles. Another started humming Let the Bodies Hit the Floor, a historical human war anthem that had somehow been classified as a religious hymn in the galactic archives. What is best behavior protocol? The pirate captain asked, suddenly looking less certain about his life choices. Oh, nothing much, Rodriguez said airily. Just this silly little diplomatic requirement that humans act civilized and avoid doing things that upset other species. You know, like showing our full strength, using our environment adaptation capabilities, or demonstrating why Earth is classified as a death world. But since you're not interested in diplomacy, she made a show of checking her watch. I should mention that about 20 minutes ago, these fine folks would have had their afternoon coffee. Military-grade stuff, not that decaf nonsense. So really, you're doing us a favor. Do you know how hard it is to find a legitimate outlet for all that caffeine-enhanced energy? One of the hostages had begun doing one-armed push-ups. Another was explaining to a thoroughly confused junior pirate the concept of parkour, and why artificial gravity was basically just a suggestion. Would you believe? Rodriguez continued conversationally that we're not even allowed to demonstrate how humans can use seemingly harmless objects as weapons. It's considered disturbing. I mean, yes, Lieutenant Chen once subdued a rogue combat droid with a paperclip and a rubber band. But that was purely in self-defense. Chen waved cheerfully at the camera. The junior pirate he'd been talking to took a large step back. So Rodriguez clasped her hands behind her back. What's it going to be? Surrender now, or do my people get to stop pretending they don't know 17 ways to weaponize that coffee maker behind you? You're bluffing, the pirate captain declared, though his voice had risen an octave. No species can be that. Innovative? Adaptable? Really tired of holding back, Rodriguez suggested. Fun fact, humans evolved as persistence predators. We literally chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. These days we call that cardio, and thanks to your impeccable timing, you've caught us right at the sweet spot between caffeine intake and our scheduled workout. On screen, one of the humans had begun explaining to a horrified pirate why CrossFit was actually a relatively mild human exercise regime. Another was demonstrating proper burpee form just to stay limber. Last chance, Rodriguez sang out. Going once. The pirate captain looked at his crew, then at the increasingly energetic humans, then back at Rodriguez. You're all insane, he declared. going twice. The whole species is completely. Time's up, Rodriguez beamed. Have fun, everyone. Remember to file your action reports in triplicate. And try not to break the ship this time. The insurance paperwork is a nightmare. The last thing the council saw before the transmission cut off was 15 humans rising in perfect unison, sporting grins that made several predatory species file for evolutionary reclassification as herbivores. In the silence that followed, Ambassador ZHTL's crystals chimed in distress. You can't just. Oh, but we can, Rodriguez replied cheerfully. It's all there in the regulations. Section 721F, paragraph 3 in the event of hostile action against civilian targets. Affected species may respond, according to their cultural norms. You did insist on including that clause, Ambassador. Something about preserving cultural diversity. She checked her watch again. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to start on the paperwork. And maybe order some repair drones. Anyone want coffee while I'm up? No? Your loss. As she sauntered out, the council collectively realized that perhaps, just perhaps, they had been looking at this all wrong. Maybe the humans hadn't been struggling to live up to galactic standards of civilization. Maybe they'd been restraining themselves out of courtesy. The sound of Ambassador ZHTL's stress cracking slightly echoed through the chamber. The security feed from the Stellar Serenity was being broadcast live to the Galactic Council, largely because Lieutenant Chen had helpfully adjusted the ship's communications array while doing his warm-up stretches. The assembled delegates watched in mounting horror as their worst fears about humanity were not only confirmed but somehow exceeded. Parkour Lieutenant Chen's voice echoed through the ship's corridor as he literally ran up a wall, pushed off the ceiling, and drop-kicked a pirate with all the grace of a caffeinated gymnast. I've always wanted to do that without filing an environmental hazard activity form first. Did he just a methane breather? Delegate bubbled in disbelief. Use artificial gravity as a suggestion rather than a law? Yes, he did, Commander Rodriguez commented from her seat, where she was calmly filling out an excessive force justification form in triplicate. You should see what they do in the 0G sections. As if on cue, the feed switched to Cargo Bay 3, where Dr. Zhao, the ship's civilian botanical researcher whose thesis on weaponizing plant life was classified on 17 different planets, was demonstrating why humans should never be underestimated. She had somehow converted her entire supply of ghost pepper extract into an improvised aerosol weapon. Now this, she announced to a group of coughing, teary-eyed pirates, is what we call spicing things up. She paused. Get it? Because it's technically a spice? No? Tough crowd. In the council chamber, Ambassador ZHTL's crystalline form was developing stress fractures. They're making puns. In combat. They're making puns. In combat. Could be worse, Rodriguez offered helpfully. They haven't started quoting action movies yet. Yippee-ki-yay, Motherfu! Lieutenant O'Malley's enthusiastic battle cry was thankfully cut off by static. Never mind. The feed switched again, showing the ship's gym where several pirates had made the tactical error of trying to corner Sergeant Jackson, the human physical training instructor. He was currently using a resistance band as an improvised slingshot while explaining proper form. See, it's all about core engagement, he lectured the increasingly distressed pirates. This is why we emphasize proper workout technique. Also, duck. A protein shake canister went flying past at near relativistic speeds. In the 0G storage section, Chief Engineer Patel had reprogrammed the inventory management drones to play what she called 3D chess, but spicy pirates floated helplessly as small robots herded them into increasingly complex geometric patterns. Look on the bright side, she told her unwilling participants. At least I'm not using the coffee maker. That would be uncivilized. The council watched in mute horror as Lieutenant Chen, now somehow on the ceiling again, began critiquing the pirates' tactical choices like a disappointed physics teacher. See, your first mistake was assuming gravity is mandatory, he explained while casually dodging plasma bolts. Your second mistake was not accounting for human cardiovascular endurance. And your third mistake. He pulled out a small bottle labeled emergency sriracha break glass in case of bland food, not checking what we classify as condiments. 3 pirates immediately surrendered at the sight of the bottle. They had apparently received the briefing on human food. Back in the council chamber, a hive mind representative raised several appendages. Are they enjoying this? Rodriguez didn't even look up from her paperwork. Oh, you have no idea. Do you know how long they've had to pretend that parkour is just an inefficient way to move around? Or that hot sauce is just for food? It's like telling cats not to knock things off tables technically possible, but against their very nature. The feed showed Dr. Zhao now conducting an impromptu seminar on the Scoville scale while several pirates signed hasty surrender documents. And this is just commercial-grade capsaicin. Wait until I show you my research samples. Make it stop, Ambassador ZH Tao whimpered. Oh, it's almost over, Rodriguez assured him, checking her watch. They're about to run out of pirates to educate. Subdue. Although technically they are learning valuable lessons about human physiology and capabilities, so it could count as a cultural exchange program. Hold on, let me check the regulations. On screen, Lieutenant Chen had begun explaining the concept of free running to a thoroughly traumatized pirate while hanging upside down from a support beam. It's really all about seeing your environment as a playground of possibilities, like this. He proceeded to demonstrate a move that made several physics-based species question their understanding of reality. Is this why humans insisted on those special insurance policies? Someone in the council chamber asked weakly. Oh yes, Rodriguez replied cheerfully. Property damage coverage is very important when we're allowed to properly express ourselves. Speaking of which, she pulled out another form. Anyone want to co-sign this requisition for repair drones? I'm thinking we should order in bulk. The sound of multiple species simultaneously requesting updates to their diplomatic protocols echoed through the chamber, nearly drowning out Lieutenant O'Malley's distant cry of this. Sparta. I told them to lay off the historical documentaries. Rodriguez sighed, checking the box for excessive cultural references on her report. The Galactic Council's documentation committee had given up trying to categorize human combat violations and was now simply writing all of them in large letters across their reports. Meanwhile, the security feed continued to provide what Commander Rodriguez was now officially classifying as mandatory cultural sensitivity training. Lieutenant Chen had taken control of the ship's intercom system and was treating the entire combat situation like an open mic night at a comedy club. Hey pirates, what did the humans say to the gravity generator? Time to bring you down. He punctuated this by actually deactivating the gravity in Section C. Please note, a harried council clerk recorded, Violation 2749, weaponizing bad humor in combat situations. Why did the pirate fail his spaceship exam? Chen continued, while using a food tray as a makeshift snowboard down a corridor. Because he got too many R's. A group of pirates, floating helplessly in the zero-G environment, groaned louder at the joke than their injuries. In the ship's fitness center, Sergeant Jackson had turned the entire situation into an impromptu CrossFit session. All right, people, pirates count as resistance training. Remember to maintain proper form while subduing hostiles. We don't want any workplace injuries. Is he conducting a fitness class during combat? Ambassador ZH Tal asked weakly. Oh yes, Rodriguez replied, filling out a non-standard exercise equipment usage form. He's been wanting to update the combat fitness curriculum. This is basically a practical exam. The feed switched to the cargo bay, where Dr. Zhao was explaining the chemical properties of capsaicin to a captive audience, quite literally captive, as they were tied up with resistance bands. And that's why humans can eat ghost peppers without dying. Fascinating, isn't it? Anyone want to sample? The universal translation matrix somehow managed to convey multiple pirates screaming no in 15 different languages simultaneously. Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Patel had reprogrammed the cleaning robots to play the flight of the Bumblebee, using their warning beepers while she conducted them in herding pirates into increasingly elaborate formations. I call this piece Surrender in B minor, she announced proudly. The documentation committee added Violation 2750, inappropriate musical accompaniment to combat operations. Back in the main corridor, Chen was still going strong. Why don't pirates play cards? Because someone's always sitting on the deck. He executed a perfect backflip while delivering the punchline. That doesn't even make sense in space, a pirate wailed. Neither does piracy without anti-grav training, but here we are, Chen replied cheerfully. Oh, here's another one. What's a pirate's favorite celestial body? Or asteroid? The council chamber was filled with the sound of multiple species facepalming with whatever passed for appendages in their respective anatomies. And for my next trick, Chen announced, I'll demonstrate why humans insisted on installing those reinforced ceiling panels. I call this move the falling star. He proceeded to do something that made several physics professors watching the feed immediately resign their positions. Violation 2751, the clerk wrote, then crossed it out and simply put physics. Just physics in general. Rodriguez looked up from her paperwork long enough to add, don't forget to document this as a successful mixed-species cooperation exercise. After all, The pirates are technically participating in human cultural activities now. They're being used as exercise equipment, ZH Tal protested. Exactly. Cultural exchange at its finest. Now, who wants to help me fill out these improvisational workout equipment liability waivers? The sound of multiple species questioning their life choices echoed through the council chamber, barely audible over Chen's distant, "Why did the pirate buy an Apple product? Because he needed an eye patch." The emergency session of the Galactic Council reconvened 12 hours after the Stellar Serenity incident, as it was now being officially recorded under 17 different classification levels. The human delegation sat calmly in their usual seats, looking perfectly composed and professional, as if they hadn't just rewritten several laws of physics and combat doctrine. Commander Rodriguez approached the podium, carrying a stack of meticulously completed paperwork that stood taller than some of the smaller delegation members. The fact that it was organized with color-coded tabs somehow made it more terrifying. "Members of the council," she began, her voice the very model of diplomatic restraint. "I'm pleased to report that the situation has been resolved with minimal permanent structural damage to the vessel." She paused. "The therapy bills for the pirates are, of course, being processed through the appropriate channels." Ambassador H. Tal, now sporting several stress repair patches across his crystalline form, twitched. "Minimal damage? Minimal? There's a cargo hold where the artificial gravity now operates sideways. Chief Engineer Patel assures me that's a feature, not a bug," Rodriguez replied smoothly. "We're calling it innovative spatial reconfiguration. I have the forms right here if you'd like to review them." The human delegation had returned to their usual behaviors. Lieutenant Chen was quietly doing paperwork, not a hint of his earlier parkour exhibition showing, though several delegates noticed he had somehow arranged his chair at a physically improbable angle. Dr. Zhao was demurely sipping tea, her collection of weapons-grade condiments nowhere in sight. Sergeant Jackson had even put on a formal uniform, though he was unconsciously doing calf raises while standing at attention. In light of recent events, the council chair being announced, its plasma form flickering nervously, "We have drafted several new regulations." How thoughtful, Rodriguez smiled. "We do so love regulations." The new rules were displayed on the main screen. No gravity manipulation for recreational purposes. Condiments must be registered as potential weapons. Exercise equipment restricted to designated areas only. Dad jokes banned during combat operations. Mandatory gravitational alignment in all ship sections. Coffee consumption to be monitored and regulated. These seemed perfectly reasonable, Rodriguez agreed, making several delegates deeply uncomfortable with how readily she accepted the restrictions. Though I should point out that under Section 47B of the Cultural Preservation Act, we're still entitled to maintain our traditional practices during designated emergency scenarios. Traditional practices, someone squeaked. "Oh, you know," she waved airily, "our time-honored human traditions of creative problem-solving, physical fitness," and she smiled beatifically, "complete and thorough documentation of all activities." She hefted the stack of paperwork. "Speaking of which, I have here the completed forms for improvised weapon usage, non-standard gravity applications, cultural exchange activities." The pirates were very educational about their perspective on human combat techniques, and of course, the requisite insurance claims. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just beaten the pirates, they'd done so while maintaining perfect regulatory compliance. "After all," Rodriguez concluded, adjusting her perfectly pressed uniform, "we humans are absolutely committed to maintaining diplomatic relations and following proper procedures." She paused. "It's just that sometimes proper procedures include parkour and weaponized hot sauce." As the human delegation filed out, several delegates could have sworn they saw Lieutenant Chen briefly walk up the wall to retrieve a dropped stylus, but when they looked again, he was the picture of diplomatic propriety. Ambassador ZH Tal's final stress fracture of the day was accompanied by the distinct sound of humans discussing where to file the paperwork for spontaneous architectural reinterpretation during conflict resolution. Some say you can still hear the echo of dad jokes in that cargo hold, where gravity remains permanently sideways for diplomatic reasons, of course.